Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 3 of the Modern Decameron Storytelling Festival. My name is Rick Scott, and I'm one of the hosts for the Law and Legend Storytelling podcast. And I'm absolutely delighted to be hosting the third day of this online festival. Now, on the third day of the original Decameron by Boccaccio, his band of storytellers moved deeper into the Italian countryside in order to increase their isolation. We're on the second week of lockdown here in the UK, and for many of you, that time will have been even longer. So we're here today to bring you another set of 10 stories to help lift your spirits for the week ahead. And to remind you that we're all in this together and that we're all here to support each other. Now, one of the things that Boccaccio's storytellers notice in the Decameron as they go into the countryside is all of the amazing wildlife that surrounds them. And you may have heard news stories about wildlife, or seen with your own eyes, wildlife moving into the public spaces that us humans have temporarily abandoned. Horses and wild boars, deer, dolphins coming back into the canals in Venice. So it's appropriate that today we have stories which celebrate the animal kingdom and our relationships with animals. You're going to hear Shona Lee Cumbers with the tale of Nasruddin and his donkey, Anne Lister's Tale of the Horseman, Ursula Holden Gill with The Princess and the Pigeon, James Howard with Squirrel Day, and our youngest Decameron storyteller Lewis Perot with The Cheeky Koala Bear. Now, the other theme of the third day of the Decameron is characters who have to keep their wits about them in order to win the day. So with that in mind, we'll hear witty exploits from Beth Guyver with Peregrine and the Mermaid, Tristan Langlois with The Peasant's Fart, Tom Hughes with The Wedding Piper, and from Gary Llewellyn, what happens when the manly Arthurian knight Sir Gawain is confronted with that age-old dilemma of figuring out what is it that women really want? So with all that said, let the stories begin.
One day, when the world was new, when it had just begun, deep in the first night, in the depths of the dark, in the depths of the forest, there was a fox. And the fox was scared. He was hiding. He looked around at the deep black night, so unfamiliar to him, because it was the first ever night. And he heard the rustling, he heard the strange cries, and he was afraid down to his very bones. But he wasn't just afraid because of the dark, because of the unknown. He was afraid because this was the first night, the first darkness, and it was the first day after Adam and Eve had eaten the fruit from the forbidden tree. After death had entered into the world. And death, as he swept across the world, he was taking one of every single animal and he was casting it down into the water where they drowned. And so the fox was hiding from death. He'd never seen death before. He didn't know what death looked like. Some said that it was like a child with eyes as black as ink. Others said that he had a huge black cloak which he swept across the sky like night itself. Others said that death had a face like a mirror. If you looked into it, you would see the time and the moment of your death rushing towards you. Well, you can't run from death. You can't hide from death. And so eventually he found the fox. When he did, the fox was sitting on the bank by the river, and death floated over to him, and he saw that the fox was crying. And he looked down at the fox and he said, "Fox, why are you crying?" And the fox took his paw and he wiped a tear away. And he pointed down at the surface of the water and he said, "Death, don't you know? I'm crying because I know that you're taking one of every pair of the animals, and already you have cast my mate down into the water. And I look there and I see her and I have to cry. Look, can't you see her there, looking back at me?" Well, Death looked, and sure enough he could see a fox in the water. Now you and I might know that really the fox was just pointing at his own reflection in the water. But Death, he was fooled, and so he floated serenely on, leaving the fox to get away scot-free. Well, the fox wasn't a humble creature, and he did like to tell a story. So it didn't take very long at all for the news to pass around through all the animals that the fox had cheated Death. In fact, the news travelled so far and wide that it even reached the ears of the beasts of the sea, until it reached the ears of the great Leviathan himself. Now the Leviathan was master, lord of all, underneath the waves, underneath the water. There he was Death. He decided who lived and who died. And when he heard that the fox had cheated Death, well, he thought that he couldn't allow a creature that was so clever and cunning, who had such powers as this, to be greater than he was. And he decided that the only way to make sure that he had the power and the cunning of the fox for himself was to eat the fox's heart. And so he turned to the creatures of his court and he said, "Which one of you will bring me the heart of the fox?" Well, not long after that, the fox was sitting on the shore by the water. Perhaps he was hunting for a fish to eat, but he looked up and he saw a strange sight. He saw a great group of animals, a fleet of sea beasts and creatures surfacing from the water, floating towards him on the waves. And as one, they began to shout and call out to the fox, to greet him and hail him, "Almighty Fox, our master, our ruler, our king." And the fox was completely baffled, didn't know what was happening. And he asked them what they meant by these strange greetings, and they said, "Well, Fox, the stories of your greatness and your cunning have reached all of us, and we can think of nobody more suited than you to be our new king. Because our Lord and Master, the great Leviathan, sadly, very sadly, is dying. But if you will come to us, to his throne underneath the ocean, then all of his power and his glory will be yours. You'll never want for anything, and you can have as much fish to eat as you could ever desire." Oh, the fox, he liked the sound of this. And so he agreed that he would go to the Leviathan's ocean throne to be crowned king of everything under the sea and above it. So the fox hopped up on the back of one of the great sea creatures, perhaps a dolphin or perhaps a whale, and they began to swim away from shore. And it was only as the shore was receding into the distance and as the sky was growing dark that the hairs on the back of the fox's neck began to stand on end a little, and he decided that he knew that there was something wrong. And so he started to demand of the creatures to tell him the truth. He started asking difficult questions. And in the end, he threatened if they didn't tell him what was really happening, that he would throw himself into the water. And so, in the end, the creatures relented and they admitted that the great Leviathan was not dying at all. That actually what he really wanted to do was to eat the heart of the fox. Well, as you can imagine, the fox was in trouble. But he didn't hesitate. He thought for a moment, and then he placed his paw on his chest and he said, "Oh, my friends, you should have told me. There's no greater honour that I can think of in the world than to have my heart consumed by the almighty Leviathan, Lord of everything above and below the waves. But you didn't tell me, and unfortunately I have not brought my heart with me." Because that's a strange thing that you might not know about us foxes. We don't always keep our hearts in our chests. We keep them somewhere else, somewhere where they'll be safe. We bury them under the ground so that they can't be stolen. So if you want me to fetch my heart, then you're going to have to take me back to land. You wouldn't want to present me to the king without my heart now, would you? I'm sure that he'd be very angry. And all the sea creatures looked at each other and discussed this, and they decided that no, they very well couldn't risk the anger and the wrath of their master once again, and so they quickly turned tail and flipper, and they took the fox all the way back to the shore. Well, the moment that the fox's paws hit the sand, he started to laugh. "Ah," he said, "oh, all of you animals, you are such fools to have believed me when I told you that us foxes don't keep our hearts in our chests. I will never come with you. And now you must turn tail and go back to your master and explain to him that the fox is greater and more cunning than any of you foolish creatures that live underneath the ocean." And that is what the creatures of the sea had to do. They went back to their lord and their master and they explained what they had happened. And the great Leviathan listened to their tale, and he was forced to agree that yes, indeed, the fox is more cunning than any animal above or below the waves, and all you creatures that live here in the depths with me are fools. And that is the end of my story.